Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's journey through Torah. This week we're in Parsha Chukat. This is ordinance or decree. Some things we find in here are pretty interesting. We find the ashes of the red heifer is in this portion. We find the issue with the fiery serpents is in this portion. There's some really good things to get into. But before we get into that in our Parsha, I want to tie some things in to be thinking about while we're going through it. Okay, normally when we go through these parshot, we start in the Torah and then we kind of read through the Torah, draw the lines to the Haftarah, the prophets, the writings, and into the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant as well. But today I kind of want to do it a little different. I want to give us some scriptures starting in the Brit Hadashah to be thinking about and having on our minds as we're going through the Torah. Okay, we know that without the Torah, we cannot properly interpret the things that were in the Brit Hadashah. We can't really understand a lot of things that were in the New Testament without seeing the Torah as the foundation of the document to explain what was really going on there, right? So today I want to start with some things to keep in mind so that it's at our forefront. Some things that Yeshua said, some things about Yeshua, some things regarding this portion, right? So we're going to get into that. And mainly today, we're going to talk about the ashes of the red heifer a little bit. We're going to get more so on the things with the fiery serpents. But there's a connection in both of these to Yeshua. Okay, and so that's where I want to start. Of course, we always try to draw the lines and make the connections to Yeshua because it's about him, right? So we always try to make sure we have those connections in place. But I wanted to start here so that we have that in the front of our minds as we're going through the rest of it, okay? So let's start off with this. Parsha Chukat is numbers or decree or ordinance of. We're going to start in John chapter 3. We're going to cover verses 14 to 21. And verse 14 says, "So as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." Interesting, isn't it? That right before, the famous John 3:16, right? But John 3:14 is kind of setting up why. Okay, so John 3:16 is what's going on, but John 3:14 tells us to go back and take a look at something so that we have a better understanding of John 3:16. Okay, because John 3:14 says, just as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness. So we're going to have to go back to look at that and find out what was going on there to fully understand what was happening in John 3:16, right? Okay, so let's move on a little bit. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." Now, this word for he loves the world, we often say, God loved all the people, which I do believe Yahweh loves his creation, okay? But that's not exactly what it says here. The word that's used here is cosmos. Cosmos doesn't mean people, although it can include people. See what I mean? We're not excluding people, just cosmos means the universe, everything. It means the order of things, okay? The way things are. And so that includes the creation of his people, but it's so much larger than that, okay? It's not just the people, it's everything. For God so loved the world, he loved everything in the perfect order that he created it, and he said that it was good. So it became corrupt. And so what happens is that Yahweh now has a restoration that he's going to bring about to return order back to the cosmos, everything that he created. Okay? So John 3:17 says, "For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. And everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God." So we're going to go back and take a quick look at verse 19, where it says, "This is the judgment." So what's the reason for it? This is the reason for judgment. What was it? People loved the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. They loved evil and refused to love the truth. Kind of takes us back to as the days of Noah, right? People, the imagination of their heart, the better way to translate it would probably be inclination of their heart was always set to evil, always given the opportunity to do good or evil. They were always going to choose evil. Okay, it's just the way that they liked to do things, the way they always wanted it done. So here it's kind of the same thing. People chose evil over good. They chose darkness over light. And that's why I said, so this is the reason for the judgment. And we see in 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12 also says, the coming of the lawless one is connected to the activity of Satan with all power and signs and false wonders, and with every kind of wicked deception toward those who are perishing. They perish because they did not accept the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God sends them a delusional force to lead them to believe what is false, so that they may be judged, all those who did not believe the truth, but delighted in wickedness. They delight in wickedness, so there's a delusion to come upon them because they did not love the truth and refuse to accept the truth, so they will believe their own lie. Okay, so back to what John says in the book of John, chapter 1, verses 4 through 9. In him, of Yeshua, was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness is not overpowered it. There came a man sent from God whose name was John, and he came as a witness to testify about the light, so that through him everyone might believe. And he was not the light, but he came to bear witness concerning the light. The true light coming into the world gives light to every man. And in 1 John 1, 5 to 10, says, this is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him and keep walking in the darkness, we are lying and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of his son Yeshua purifies us from all sin. If we say we have no sin, we are deceiving ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and righteous to forgive our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. So when we go back and we read when Yeshua says, so just as the serpent was lifted up, and so must Yeshua be lifted up, what was the reason? What was the purpose? And we see this was tied directly to a sin of the people. It was because of sin that the serpents were sent, right? And so because of our sin is why Yeshua was lifted up. And we'll start to see some parallels and some connections as we go through this, okay? So just as the serpent was lifted up, what was the situation going on and right before the serpent was lifted up? What was the circumstances around this whole time? Well, back in Numbers 21, we'll go to verses 1 through 5. It says, a Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, who lived in the desert, heard Israel was coming by the way of Atarim. He fought against Israel, and he took some of them captive. What we find here, why was he able to take some of them captive at all? Because a lack of integrity opens doors for attack. We find in Amalek as well in Deuteronomy 25, 17, and 18, where it says, remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you, and he did not fear God. He attacked those, specifically it says, who were unstable and procrastinating. They weren't following directly. They weren't all the way in the camp. They weren't all the way, they were just like on the outskirts of the camp. Okay, we're going the right direction, kind of. We're just kind of tagging along, not fully committed to be in, to go with everyone, but they're out and around, right? And these are the ones that got attacked. And so he didn't fear God, so he attacked the people. And he took those who were procrastinating, and it says that faint and feeble, but guess what? Scripture also says when they came out of Mitzrayim, there was none sick, or none faint, none feeble among them. So what could this really mean? I believe this means spiritually, they didn't have full faith. They were wavering or vacillating in their faith, going back and forth. We're with you, we're not, we're with you, we're not, we're with you, we're not, and kind of like, yes, Yahweh delivered us, and Moses, you brought us out here to die, right? How many times do we see that going back and forth, which we see again in this portion, right? So going on in Numbers 21, verse 2, so Israel vowed a vow to Yahweh, and they said, if you will indeed give this people into my hand, then I will devote their cities to destruction. And Yahweh heeded the voice of Israel and gave over the Canaanites, and they devoted them and their cities to destruction. So the name of the place was called Hormah. So if there's a few things to notice here. One, there were battles in the wilderness. As Yahweh was leading them through the wilderness, there were battles that they did have to go through. And in this battle, there were some who were taken captive. However, Israel made a vow of deliverance for the people that were taken captive. Notice, this was not Moshe who made the vow. This was not Aaron who made the vow. This was not Yahweh who made the vow. This was Israel who made the vow. This was the people saying, some of our people have been taken captive. We will go and take them back. Yahweh be with us, and we will devote their cities to destruction. In other words, we will completely destroy their cities because they have taken your people. And Yahweh listened to them, and this is what happened, right? So in 21, verse 4, so from Mount Hor, they set out by the way to the Red Sea. And it's worth noting this is a zigzag in the direction of the land. They were essentially backtracking here. Okay, they were no longer going forward, they were backtracking, and then they had to go around the land of Edom. And then what do we read? That the people became impatient along the way. Now there's a lot to be said about this. Okay, Yahweh delivered the people. They did what they said, but now they're zigzagging. They're going back and forth. They're like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be going forward. We're not going forward anymore. Where are we going? We're taking the long route. What? Aren't we there yet? How much longer is it going to be? Right? So they're wavering here. They're getting impatient. How many times do we get impatient with what Yahweh has given to us, with what He's told us, with just life in general? How many times do we get impatient? Yahweh, I thought you were going to be with me. I thought you were going to deliver me. I thought that you were going to lead me and guide me and do amazing things in my life, right? How many times do we get impatient? See, we jump the gun on things. We get used to this microwave mentality, right? If Yahweh says something or impresses something in our lives, we want it yesterday, you know? No, He has to work things in our life as well. A lot of times we cannot hold on to or maintain or fully walk in the blessing that He has for us until some things in our life changes. So what He will do, He will change us to equip us to handle the blessing that He is giving us. We find in Ecclesiastes 7, 8 through 10, it says, better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. In other words, longing for yesteryears, the glory days, right? You ever notice that the older you get, the better you used to be? The better things always were. It's not so good nowadays, but boy, back in the day, right? Be careful with that, because what we're really saying is that Yahweh's not doing good in our life now. Yahweh's not leading us now, and we're not acknowledging Him in all of our ways. And be careful with these things. Ephesians 4, 1 through 3 says, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. This is how we're supposed to live. This is how we're supposed to be. Humility, gentleness, patience, walking with one another, trying to maintain unity, bond of peace, a spirit of peace in our life, in our midst. And that's learning to hear His voice, learning to walk together, right? 1 Thessalonians 5, 11 to 15 says, therefore, encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. We ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. See that no one repays anyone evil for evil, but always seek to do good to one another and to everyone. So this is us in life. Are we seeking to do good? Are we being patient? Are we looking for opportunities to bless or to be a blessing to someone? Or is it just, nope, we're gonna do our thing our way, and that's gonna be the end of it, right? We see another example of this in our path of life. Is, do we choose peace or do we choose division, right? The story of Yosef and his brothers, not getting into all that story today, But in the story of Joseph and his brothers, we know that his brothers essentially sold him into slavery, and he went to Mitzrayim and was falsely accused, was thrown in prison, and I mean the low of the low of the low. Just when he thought it was worse, it got worse, right? But yet Yahweh pulled him out of there and made Yosef ruler over Mitzrayim, his only next to Pharaoh, and essentially ruler of the world, because he is the one who saved the world, because Yahweh gave him wisdom on what to do in the situation regarding the famine that was coming. And so he's in the situation now where all have to come to him to buy bread. And so his brothers come to him, and it comes to a point where Yosef reveals himself. And when he reveals himself, his brothers are scared. Because, I mean, wouldn't you be? His brothers are scared. Now they're saying, what's going to happen? Is he going to retaliate? Is he going to try to kill us? What's going on? And then, well, I told you we shouldn't have done it. Yeah, but you were there too. You really didn't say anything. All this going on. They have plenty of opportunity to listen to their brother, to try to make a path of blessing from this point forward, or to be divided and cause that rift. And ultimately, if they were bringing this division and be divided in there and they didn't listen to Yosef, the entire family would die. So what happens, Genesis 45:24, Yosef sends his brothers along the way, go back home and get dad and the rest of the people and bring them all in, right? And he says, do not quarrel along the way. And that's good advice for us as well. In our way of life, and as we're going through life and the things we're doing, don't be so anxious to look for opportunities to quarrel with people. We're really quick to look for opportunities to fight with one another, and to prove our point, to prove we're right, and especially when it comes to the Yahweh and His Word. Guys, we don't have to prove Yahweh's Word is true. It's true. Yahweh will prove it. We need to live it, and we need to show it in the midst of the people around us. Also see in Mark 9:33 and 34, it says the people that came to Capernaum, the disciples, and then when he was in the house, Yeshua asked them, so what were you discussing along the way? But they kept silent, because on the way they were arguing with one another about who was the greatest. See that? They were walking along the way, and the disciples were arguing about who was the greatest among them, who was the best among them. And it was Yeshua, they get to where they're going. Yeshua goes, so what are you guys talking about? Busted. Right? Nothing. We weren't saying anything, right? And again, Yeshua was pointing out the fact of, if we really want to serve Yahweh, we're going to learn to serve one another. We're going to be humble, essentially. Okay, it's not always going to have to be, my way. We're going to have to be humble about the things that Yahweh has given us. So the people that we see here we're reading about Israel in the desert, the people, they had just gone through a battle. And one of the things we learn in the Torah is that times of battle will leave you unclean or disconnected for a season, for a little bit of time. There was battle, there was death. You touched blood, you touched corpses, you touched bodies. And so there were times of battle or warfare that it would leave someone unclean for a period, for a season. But because of the uncleanness, we see that Yahweh made a way for the people to be cleansed so they could come back into the camp. They couldn't come fresh from the battle and go right to the tabernacle. Okay? They had to be cleansed along the way, to be clean, to be brought in. And so again, having the tabernacle in their midst made them aware of the issues of clean and unclean, and that which is holy and that which is common. And so they had to make sure, as they approached to dwell, they had to be clean. And so we see this in the Torah. Leviticus 15:31 says, you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst. If they defile the tabernacle, Yahweh says they will die because of their uncleanness, because they defiled the tabernacle. In Deuteronomy 23:14, it says, Yahweh your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore shall your camp be holy, and see that no unclean thing in you, and turn away from you. So again, here he's saying, see that there's no unclean thing among you, so that Yahweh turns away from you. And in 2 Corinthians 6:17, we often hear, well, but there's no tabernacle here now, there's no temple here now. And besides that, that our body, we are a temple for God. And I agree, we are a temple, a place for him to dwell, a habitation for his presence. But that does not mean that no longer is it the issues of clean, unclean, holy, and common irrelevant. Matter of fact, it makes it that much more applicable, because instead of having a place where Yahweh dwelled that you would go and you would approach, if he lives in you, you can't get any closer than that. And that's why we see in 2 Corinthians 6:17, it says, go out from their midst and be separate. Don't touch the unclean thing, and I will receive you and I will welcome you. 2 Corinthians 10:3-5 says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty to God through the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Mashiach. Okay, so now we go back to Numbers. Let's go to chapter 31, verses 19-24. This is after the battle. This is after the things that happen in there. Then they were to encamp outside the camp for 7 days. Whoever of you has killed any person, or whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And you shall purify every garment, every article of skin, all work of goat's hair, and every article of wood. And then Eleazar the priest said to the men in the army who had gone to the battle, this is the statute of the law that Yahweh has commanded Moshe. Right? So again, there was a purification after they came back from battle. Verse 22, only the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that can stand the fire, you shall pass through the fire, and it shall be clean. Nevertheless, it shall also be purified with the water for impurity. Whatever cannot stand the fire, you shall pass through the water. And you must wash your clothes on the 7th day, and you shall be clean. And afterward, you may come into the camp. This is another example that we see a provision for the half shekel. Remember the half shekel that was given? Remember, half shekel wasn't a unit of like actually a coin or piece of money. It was actually a unit of weight. So you say half shekel, and you see you may have seen some coins that are made that are half shekel. That doesn't mean that here's an example. Just you put it in modern terms. Okay, let's just say that there's 4 shekels to $1. So 1 shekel is roughly around a quarter. So a half shekel would be roughly 12.5 cents. It's not what we're talking about here. Okay, a shekel is a unit of weight, and this was supposed to be made from silver. All right, so this was a silver, and the weight was half a shekel. It's not like they carried a wallet with the paper money, right? They weighed out the money. But this was primarily for an atonement, and this was primarily a soldier's mitzvah that was given, because in Exodus 30, verses 12-16, you say, when you take a census of the people of Israel, each shall give a ransom for his life to Yahweh when you number them, that there be no plague among them when you number them. Each one who is numbered in the census shall give this a half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. Shekel is 20 gerahs. Half a shekel as an offering to Yahweh. Everyone who is numbered in the census from 20 years old and upward shall give Yahweh's offering. The rich shall not give more, the poor shall not give less than the half shekel when you give Yahweh's offering to make atonement for your lives. You shall take the atonement money from the people of Israel, and shall give it to the service of the tent of meeting, that it may bring the people of Israel to remembrance before Yahweh, so as to make atonement for your lives. So, as silver was used as an atonement, it was given to the Mishkan, to have in the service of the tabernacle. The initial time it was given, and it was helped make the sockets that held all the pieces together for the tabernacle. It's pretty amazing. But again, what we see here is that everyone gave the same amount for this. Okay, and it was an atonement that was given as an offering to Yahweh on behalf of the people. So to be cleansed and restored to worship, there's a need for the process of cleansing. Now, because of this, we see entering the ceremony for the ashes of the red heifer, the para adoma, okay, which is really amazing. There's really nothing in here that really makes sense, but yet this is instructions from Yahweh. This is what's called Chukat, a decree of Chukat. It's something that Yahweh instructs us to do, but he doesn't always tell us why. Okay, so these are just saying this is the ordinance or a decree. A huk is also translated as a custom. These are just things that are just done because this is the way I want it done, right? And for no other reason, that's why we do it. So this whole idea of the para adoma, it points to Mashiach, the whole idea of it. But the process is difficult to understand, okay? So it's an act of faith. We do it completely even though we don't understand really why. So the red heifer ceremony, some things that are done, this is a foretelling or a cleansing that the atonement that Mashiach would bring. because everyone involved in the process of preparing the ashes of the red heifer, everyone in the process became unclean. But the water was used to cleanse. So in order to cleanse others, if I was involved in the process, I would have to become unclean so that someone else could be cleansed. We see example of this following in Isaiah 53 as well, right? He bore our sin, our disease, our sickness, all of these things. He took upon himself these things so we would not have to. Okay? So again, it's the idea of he became this so that I would not have to suffer that. And so he took on my uncleanness, my sickness, and all of these things. Rashi in Moed Katan 28 says, just as the sacrifices provide atonement, so does the death of a righteous person. How does that fit? So does the death of a righteous person can provide atonement? The scripture says that none is righteous, none, right? But in Romans 5:19, it says, for by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners. So the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. We're talking about a righteous man. At the death of a righteous man, people can be restored. We see an example of this when the cities of refuge that were given from the Levite cities of refuge. If someone had committed manslaughter that was not intentional, it was not murder, it was manslaughter, they shed blood, they could go to a city of refuge and they could take refuge there and not have to worry about someone coming after them to slay them because they had slain their kin. But yet at the death of the high priest, all who were in the cities of refuge could return back to their homes and be entered into the community free and clear. Not have to worry about that, right? So the death of the righteous, the high priest, somehow, some way caused those transgressions to be atoned for so they could go and now return to be restored among the community of the people. We also see in John chapter 11 where Caiaphas says of Yeshua that it is expedient that one man die for the nation, that not the whole nation perish. But we understand that he was speaking of this not regarding these people here alone, but regarding all the people of God, all the people of Israel, all the people of God who were scattered abroad. So again, Caiaphas was mentioning the death of a righteous person could bring restoration to Israel. And again, this is something else that we see here as the ashes of the red heifer to bring purification. Someone became unclean so that somebody else could be cleansed. So red heifer is para adoma. Para adoma. Para is a heifer. It's the feminine of par, which is bull. And par can also mean the breaking forth of something, or the breaking forth of strength, or something broken, right? Adama is from Edom, which is red, or Adam, which is man. So para adama can also imply a man to be broken. Again, I hope we're seeing pictures of Yeshua and what would happen up here. We see in Genesis 2:7, it says that Yahweh formed the man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. So it says, Vayeter Yahweh Elohim et ha'adam. See this word, Adam, the Aleph Taf Adam. He formed the Aleph Taf Adam, the man, from Adamah, min ha'adamah, from the ground. And then he breathed in. So some other related words here. Adamah is red clay or earth. Adom is red. Adumah is also red, but it's a feminine gender. Adam is Adam or mankind. Edom is Esau, also called Edom. Dam is blood, and Damam is death. All these same root in there, so they are all related words. Numbers 21, back to that 1 through 5, right? Let's go to verse 5. After the battle and after they change course, after all of these things, now what happens? So the people spoke against God and against Moses. See, they're impatient, and so now they're speaking against God. And he says, why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food, no water. We loathe this worthless food. Wow, they're impatient, and discontentment and lack of faith caused them to loathe their blessings. They said, that in the beginning, the manna, wow, what is this? And Moshe told them, manhu, what is this? They said, this is the bread from heaven. This is the bread that Yahweh said He's going to give you. This is going to sustain you. This was a blessing. They rejoice that they have food. And now they're at a point where they're like, we loathe this manna. I'm tired of manna. I am sick of manna. But yet every day, as a miracle from Yahweh, there it was. See that? They loathed the goodness and the grace of Yahweh in giving them what they needed today. Give us this day our daily bread, giving them what they needed today, and so that they could walk and continue to go forward. So they're saying, instead of saying, thank you, Yahweh, for sustaining me, keeping me alive, and giving me food in this wilderness, they resented what Yahweh had done for them. They cursed what Yahweh was giving them. They cursed the blessing that Yahweh gave to them. So what did they do? They complain, and what happens? It says, Numbers 21:6, in response, Adonai sent poisonous snakes among the people, and they bit the people, and many of Israel's people died. So was the problem the serpent? Was the problem the serpents? No. The problem was the heart of the people and the venom that they were spewing out of their own mouth. Okay? Israel had not taken responsibility for their lack of faith in the wilderness, much like we see, Adam. Yahweh, it was that woman you gave me. It's your fault because you gave me the woman, and it was her fault because, she's the one who did it. And then, it wasn't me. It was the serpent's fault, passing responsibility, right? I had a good friend tell me once that the serpent is never as scary as a broken promise to Yahweh. That's amazing to really contemplate on and think about, because, the lies of the serpent and all of this, but you don't have to listen to these things. But yet when we break the heart of our Father, this is what Israel did. They had said, we will follow you, we will listen, we will obey, we will be obedient, and I hate what you've given me. Wow. But this is where they were. So what we find here, if we go back, why the serpents? Well, here's some other issues, okay? The serpent, like in the Garden of Eden, was punished for speaking words of slander against Yahweh. It enticed Adam and Chava, it enticed them to go against the word of Yahweh, to come away from what Yahweh had said, right? So God sent the serpent, who was punished for speaking slander, to punish those who were guilty of speaking slander. In other words, let the punishment fit the crime. Okay, you should recognize the punishment because it's tied to what you did. Okay, example of this: when we allow ourselves to slip into this kind of talking, we're lining ourselves up with the evil one. We're lining ourselves up with the serpent and speaking what he has got for us. We need to stop that and speak the word of Yahweh, right? So Yahweh sent fiery serpents. Interesting how it says here this as well. Okay. He sent fiery serpents. Again, Aleph Tav, okay, Hanchashim Asrafim. Interesting, because he sent Hanchashim, that's the serpents. Nachash is a serpent, and then the Asrafim, the seraphim. So we can see fiery, but it also translates as seraphim. What do we see seraphim? Right? Isaiah 6 gives us another example. Isaiah 6, 1-8 says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And above him stood seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, holy, holy, holy is Yahweh Sabaoth. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Verse 5, and I said, look at the response, woe is me, for I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen Yahweh Sabaoth. So he says, his response to seeing this is, I am a man of unclean lips. The things that I speak are unclean. When he saw the fiery seraphim and proclaiming the holy, 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 right? So again, there's this connection of this cleansing and purification and fire, right? So verse 6, so then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs off the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. And I heard the voice of Yahweh saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. Haneni shalachani. So we have here in Isaiah, again, is a picture of fire purifying. You saw the seraphim, the fiery, right, seraphim, and then they took the coal from the altar, fire, touched it to his lips, that which he was speaking was unclean, and they say, you are atoned for. So again, there's a connection here of fire and purification and the things that they were speaking and all of this happening in together, okay? Numbers 21, 7 through 9. Let's go back here. So now all the people came to Moses and they said, we have sinned because we have spoken against Yahweh and against you. So pray unto Yahweh that he take away the serpents from us. And Moshe prayed for the people. And Yahweh said to Moshe, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten when he looks on it shall live. And verse 9, so Moshe made the serpent of brass and he put it upon a pole. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. So this word for pole is nes. Nes also means a miracle or a banner. Okay, something that is lifted up. And then the serpent, he says, make the fiery serpent. Well, out of copper, you can't make it fiery out of copper. But the word nachash is also the word for serpent or copper, the same root words in that. Okay, so what does this got to do with these things? When they looked up and they saw the serpent on the nest, the serpent on the pole, the miracle on the pole, the banner on the pole, that they would look up and make the acknowledgement. See, in the faith, they would look up. They could have said, why do I have to look up? That's ridiculous. I'm not doing it. So in faith, they had to look up and they acknowledged their sin. The fiery serpent was sent. I'm looking at it. The fiery serpent was sent because of my sin, what I was saying, what I was doing. And I repent for that because I am saying, Yahweh, heal me when I look up to that which was lifted, to that miracle, to that banner, that sign that was lifted up for the world to see. And I am acknowledging that. Isaiah 45:22 says, turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. For I am God and there is no other. So looking up to the bronze serpent on the pole was an acknowledgement of their sin. To look up in faith is to recognize we have sinned and only Yahweh can make us whole. And again, we saw a pole as nes, generally means a rallying point or a standard which draws people together, or a banner which draws people together. This is a signal pole with an ensign attached, raised up as a point of focus or an object of hope. Something that is lifted up that we look and gather around, so there's an object of hope that is there. Consider even in battle when they used to have color bearers, right? They would lift up the poles and have the colors up there. Why? So that if a person got turned around or confused or whatever, they could see that's what I'm following. So they know, as long as this is advancing, we're going forward. I don't feel like we're making progress, but we are moving forward. It gave us hope. And that's what it says here as well. Just as the serpent was lifted up, we acknowledge our sin. We look at that and it gives us hope. Now consider as well when he says, just as the serpent was lifted up, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So must Yeshua be lifted up. That when we look up, we see him. He is bearing our sin, our grief, our sickness, all of these things. And he gives us hope. He restores us. Exodus 17:14 and 15. Let's go back. Adonai said to Moshe, write this for a memorial in the book and rehearse it in the hearing of Joshua, for I will utterly blot out the memory of the Amalekites from under heaven. Then Moshe built an altar and called the name of it Adonai Nisi. And he called it Vayikra Shemo Yahweh Nisi. It's from the word Nes. Yahweh is my banner. Yahweh is my miracle. Yahweh is the one that I acknowledge that is lifted up above all others, and he is lifted up on that pole. He is the one that gives me hope. He is the standard that is lifted up for Israel. Isaiah 59:19 says, so shall they fear the name of Yahweh from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of Yahweh shall lift up a standard against him. Isaiah 18:3, all inhabitants of the world and dwellers of the earth, see, when he lifts up an ensign, when he lifts up a nes, when he lifts up the nest on the mountains, and when you hear the shofar, when he blows the trumpet, hear it. Now we go to John 3:14 and 15 again. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, whoever believes in him would not perish, but have eternal life. Wow. See all that? Yeshua is the nest that was lifted up. He is the one that's lifted up that gives us hope. Continuing on, Isaiah 62:10 and 11. Go through the gates, clear the way for the people, build up the highway, remove the stones, lift up a banner over the people. Behold, Adonai has proclaimed to the ends of the earth, say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your salvation comes. See, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. Isaiah 49:22, thus says Adonai Elohim, look, I will lift my hands to the nations, raise my banner to the people, and they will bring your sons on their chest and carry your daughters on their shoulders. See that? This banner that is lifted up, this banner is a salvation. He is coming, and all of this tying in to Yeshua. Colossians 2, verses 12 to 15 says, we are buried with him in baptism, so we are risen with him through the faith of the operation of God who raised him from the dead. And you, being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, has he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Wow. See, he has overcome when he was lifted up. Isaiah 5:26 says, he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far, and he will hiss. The word there for hiss is sarach, which means to be shrill or to whistle or to hiss. Sharach. That means to whistle or hiss. So he's whistling from the end of the earth, and behold, they will come and swiftly. Isaiah 11:12 and 13 says, he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth, and envy of Ephraim shall depart, and all the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off, and Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. See that? When he is lifted up and he gathers us all together, there will be unity. So again, why a bronze serpent lifted up? Here's another example. To look up and to see the accusation that was against us. This was the ordinance or the decree that was against us. This was our sin. This is what we did. See that? Look up. There it is. That's what we did. Consider snakebite. To create an antivenin, how was it made? An animal such as a horse or a goat or a sheep is injected with a small amount of venom. The antibodies released by the animal's immune system to fight the damaging venom are later harvested via bleeding. The blood serum or plasma is then concentrated and purified into pharmaceutical-grade antivenom. So for us to have a cure for the poison, an animal essentially has to be poisoned. Even though we can fight it off naturally, it still is introduced to the poison. For us to have a cure for the poison, something else had to be poisoned. That's what Yeshua was telling Nicodemus. He says the Son of Man is the antivenin. In the same way the bronze snake is lifted up, Yeshua was lifted up on the cross. Just seeing the bronze snake didn't cure them, but they had to look up at the snake when they were looking in faith that Yahweh would save them. Israel was unable to save and cure themselves. They had to believe that Yahweh had the power to heal, and all they had to do was look up at the sign. The problem with the signs, though, is that people get stuck at the signs. Instead of acknowledging Yahweh who gave us the sign, they stop at the sign and worship the sign and hang out at the sign. When we're supposed to go past the sign. Don't fall into the trap. Don't do that. Yes, Yahweh may have done amazing things and amazing miracles for us, but we hang out at the miracle that used to happen and did happen, and we lose sight of what God wants to do in our life right now. So don't be careful we don't do that. Matthew 12:39 says, a wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign. None will be given except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. Matthew 16:4 says, a wicked and adulterous generation is asking for a sign. Will certainly not be given a sign except the sign of Jonah. With that, he left them and went off. Luke 11:29, again, as the people crowded around him, Yeshua said, this generation is a wicked generation. It asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Matthew 7:21-23 It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name, drive out demons in your name, perform miracles in your name? And I will say to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, workers of lawlessness. You who are doing things you should be doing, but you are a worker of lawlessness, iniquity. You are working outside of my word. Anomia, meaning without, nomos, meaning law. You are working outside of my word that I have given you, but you're doing the signs, wonders, and miracles, but you're not doing it for me because you're not keeping my word. And this kind of ties in with Deuteronomy 13 and the test for a false prophet as well. It says, whatever I command you, you are to take care to do. You are not to add or take away. Suppose a prophet or a dreamer of dreams rises among you and gives you signs or wonders. And the sign or wonder he spoke to you comes true. And then he says, let's follow other gods you have not known and let's serve them. See? Verse 4, you must not listen to the words of that prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for Adonai your God is testing you to find out whether you love Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And Adonai your God you will follow, and him you will fear. His mitzvot you will keep, to his voice you will listen, and him you will serve, and to him you will cling. What he's saying here is that though someone gives you signs, wonders, and miracles and all these things, if they're not upholding the word, if they're not leading you in the word, if they're not teaching you words of life, words from Yahweh, words from his Torah, then they're a false prophet. And they're trying to draw you away from the word you have already been given. And this was the warning for us. See? It's like Israel in the wilderness, they were there, but yet, were they? They turned their hearts away from him, and they were speaking against what God was doing in the midst. And that's why those serpents were sent. Matthew 24:24 says, false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and show great signs and wonders so as to lead people astray, and if possible, even the chosen. Mark 13:22, false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and show signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the chosen. 2 Thessalonians 2:9, the coming of the lawless one is connected to the activity of Satan with all power and signs and false wonders. Revelation 19:20 says, the beast was captured, and along with him the false prophet, who had performed the signs before him by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, as well as those who had worshipped his image, and these were thrown alive in the lake of fire. So again, even the signs that were originally given by Yahweh can become idolatrous. Guard your heart. People can even worship the signs that were there. And that's what we said. Be careful. Guard your heart. Make sure we're worshiping Yahweh and not worshiping the signs. It's not like we love Yahweh because of what he does for me. No, we love him because of who he is. Because see, if we love Yahweh because of what he does for me, then as soon as the does for me isn't exactly what we want, we stop serving Yahweh. See? Be careful, because your heart can become idolatrous. Deuteronomy 4:11-14 says, you came near and you stood at the foot of the mountain while the mountain burned with fire to the heart of heaven, wrapped in darkness, cloud, and gloom. And Yahweh spoke to you out of the midst of the fire, but you heard the sound of words, you saw no form. There was only a voice. And he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, that is the 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and rules that you might do them in the land where you were going to possess. So, with all that said, why am I going off on that? Because look what happened to the bronze serpent. Okay, the bronze serpent was around for a while, but Hezekiah got rid of it. Why would he get rid of it? I mean, that'd be like an awesome testimony to say that Yahweh used this to help and save the people of Israel. This was an amazing thing that Yahweh gave us, right? But what happened? The people started burning incense to it. See how we are? 2 Kings 18:4 says that Hezekiah removed the high places, and he broke the images, he cut down the groves, and he broke in pieces the brass serpent that Moshe made, for unto those days the children of Israel burnt incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. Nehushtan is not the name of it. Nehushtan means simply, it's copper. So what he did, he smashed in pieces the bronze serpent, and he's telling the people, it's just copper, guys. There's nothing magical or mystical about this copper. It's just copper. And he's saying, it was the obedience and the act of obedience that to the words of Yahweh that brought deliverance, not the bronze serpent. Okay? So, how do we handle it when Hasatan tries to lead us astray? How do we handle the thoughts that we should be taking captive? Matthew 4:10 says, Yeshua says, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve, quoting from Deuteronomy 6:13. And we see in 2 Peter 3:14, says, therefore, dear friends, as you look for these things, do everything you can to be found by him, how? Without spot or defect and at peace. Do everything you can to be found without spot or defect and at peace. That's how we walk. That's how we live. Not speaking words of slander, not speaking fiery words, but speaking words of life, words of peace, words of hope. These are the things that we should be doing in our lives day by day. Ephesians 5:25-27 gives us an example as well. As for husbands, love your wives, just as the Messiah loved the community and he indeed gave himself up on its behalf, in order to set it apart for God, making it clean through the immersion in the mikvah, so to speak, in order to present the community to himself as a bride to be well pleased with, without spot, wrinkle, or any such thing, holy and without defect. What's happening here is he's saying that Yeshua purified the bride, makes her clean, so that he can present to himself without spot, without wrinkle. In other words, when we look upon him, he restores, he cleanses, he makes clean, he allows us to draw near. All we have to do is look to him. Wow. Okay. It's a lot, isn't it, guys? But that's all I have for you today. So I pray this has been encouraging to you. I pray this has been challenging for you. I pray this has been a blessing to you as well. And if it has been a blessing, then on whatever avenue you watch or you listen, share it. Help get it out there. Okay, help in whatever avenue that you use, somebody else uses too. If this has been a blessing to you, it's got to bless somebody else, right? So help get them out there and help share these so that we can keep this message going out. And if this has been a blessing to you, also please consider making a donation to help us keep making these, to help us keep these things going along. And we want to do this as long as we can, guys. So help be a part of that. Help pray about these things. Help pray for these videos. Help get them out there. Help share them. And if Yahweh puts on your heart, make a donation to help that as well. Okay. So guys, until next time, be blessed, be a blessing, and shalom.